Good night and welcome to Mindful Life 210. I am your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. I was out for the last week. Yeah, we took that last week of Easter off. And I was doing some teaching, some more focused teaching over that last week. And some things I was noticing. There were some things I was noticing. Now, the majority of this life we're going to deal with some crime issues that have been coming to the top in terms of discussion, because there's a crime symposium now being carried out, being held by CARICOM, and they're discussing the crime issues. But right before we get into crime, and these are linked, hopefully if we get through enough of these stories tonight, we'll get back to how the link in this is so direct. But something I was noticing teaching in education. So there's a particular student I've been teaching mathematics, CXC maths. That subject that many people struggle with. We're going through CXC maths. Nice, lovely stuff. And something I've been noticing with that student and some other students in maths in particular. Previously, 10 years ago, teaching CXC maths, the things that were easy for most people, I am not talking about people who genuinely struggle with maths. I'm talking about the average student in high school. The thing that was most easy for them in maths is algebra. Like 2x plus 1 is equal to 20. That's not 21. It's not a very difficult thing to figure out. So algebra generally and simultaneously, those first 1, 2, 3 questions were relatively easy. But the thing with those questions is those style of questions, in order to understand maths in terms of algebra, what's really needed isn't explanation. It's not someone sitting teaching you and explaining how each sum is done. It's practice. That's why algebra, the way to get algebra in maths at that point in school is just homework. They're going to give you 20 sums per day, 30, 40, 50 sums per day to just do to try and get it. And something I've noticed is I've seen a reversal. There are more students now struggling with simple algebra and simultaneous equations. And some of those students now get matrices and vectors, some of the more complicated concepts to learn, but the thing that required practice, now they don't have it. Good night, Chinese Dogla. And one of the reasons I've noticed is those 3 years of pandemic style teaching, it really hampered a lot of the education system in ways that some people may not even notice. So there's a generation, well, I don't know for all. I'm teaching privately, so I could speak for some of my students, and some students who would have been generally the grade 2, grade 1 students, the areas you expect them to struggle in and not the areas they're struggling in anymore. Good afternoon, Positive Radiation. They're not struggling in those areas. The areas of struggle have moved. They have moved to the areas that previously were easy. Most relatively good math students love simultaneous equations. Easy stuff. Now all of a sudden it's a strange thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the hampered education that went on over this pandemic period. And hampering the education for generations is going to have an effect on the learning levels of that generation. And when some of that generation now have slipped through the cracks, they no longer have a good grasp of the fundamentals of things like mathematics. They're no longer interested in pushing forward because they are lost. What do you think happens to them? Chiny Douglas says fundamental understanding seems to be lacking with students. Yes, I was missing the last week, Positive Radiation. The last week was off. But the topic tonight, the main topic we're talking about is the whole crime symposium that's going on now with the CARICOM leaders. We're going to delve into that. But I was just noting at the beginning, last week I was teaching quite a bit of lessons, and I was noting that I've noticed in particularly mathematics, some students, the areas of struggle have kind of switched. The areas of struggle for the average, good to average students generally were not algebra, were not simultaneous equations. Those were the easier parts. It would be the parts where you have to understand concepts and try and figure out the concepts like the vectors, matrices, that later part of the math paper. Now we're seeing students struggling with questions 1, 2, and 3, which was not the common thing. I like the PM of the Caribbean bad up the US. I suppose you mean Mia Motley. how she bad up the US. Now, I am not a big fan of the United States, but I am always wary when people use the United States as a convenient whipping post, because it's sometimes what they whip the US for is just the reality of human civilization. It's not that the United States is particularly doing something so evil. Sometimes they do it better than all of the other alternatives. It's just the reality of human civilization. There has always been a big fish in the pond. There will always be a big fish in the pond. It just so happens that's the big fish, and you don't generally like the big fish, the way how it goes. This generation doesn't like thinking. Well, partially I might say some of that, but I don't blame that on this generation. This generation likes what they were taught. They were taught by the previous generation. So if you're saying that this generation doesn't like thinking, the problem is they were taught not to like thinking from the previous generation. Tap those screens if you know what 2 + 2 equals. Thank you, Chinese Dogla. So yes, make sure you hit that like button if you're inside of the live. Double tap that screen if you are on TikTok. That's how you hit that like button over there. But let's see if we could dive into some of the stories that have been moving around. And I'll start off with Mr. Hines. I saw Gary Griffith disagreeing with some of the comments coming from Mr. Hines, and I actually disagreed too. Now, I have pity for the man. I have pity for the man and the position he is in. I agree that the Minister of National Security cannot stop or cure crime. I agree. Don't get me wrong. Mr. Hines, I agree with you. You cannot solve or stop crime. But then he went on to say that he is in charge of policy, that crime fighting was under the purview of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and it's true. But okay, you do understand that you're throwing the TTPS under the bus by saying that. You're saying that, okay, I am doing my job, the crime rate is high because the TTPS is failing. I would like to have some interviews with these people. If any one of you could arrange that, I would love to have just as probably 12 questions, no more than 12 questions, just a series of questions. Okay. So it's the TTPS's fault, all right? And you are in charge of policy. Okay, fine. I agree with those. Okay, let's go on from there. All right. So why can't the TTPS get a handle on crime? Is the problem that the TTPS has poor leadership? Well, if the problem is that the TTPS has poor leadership, then the selection of the leader of the police is a policy issue. So if the reason the police aren't doing their job properly is because of their poor leadership, then that's a policy issue. Okay, well, if the police aren't doing their job properly because they are too corrupt, if you're saying the TTPS is too corrupt, that's why they aren't doing their job properly. Okay, well, corruption, rooting out corruption inside of the police service is a policy thing. You have to have the correct policies to ensure that the police service doesn't fester corruption. Or if it is that the reason the police service cannot do their job is because good night, pimping away, you get that shades. All right, sir. I have no shades, but good night, sir. If the issue is that the TTPS doesn't have a trusting relationship with the public, and I would say a big part of the issue in policing in Trinidad and Tobago is that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Trinidad and Tobago citizens do not have a trusting relationship with each other. If that is the issue, that's a policy problem. Why isn't there trust between the police, the police and the citizens? Policy issues. So if you're saying that, okay, it's because the police aren't doing their job. If the police aren't doing their job, you are the person in charge of them either way. Let's look at what Mr. Griffith had to say on that. Gary disagrees with Hines on crime plan. Former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith on Saturday said Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines was incorrect when he said that a crime plan is the responsibility of the Commissioner of Police. Griffith said a Minister of National Security formulates policies to ensure that the law enforcement agencies can operationalize them. He said while he was Minister of National Security, the National Operations Center, the National Security Special Operation Group, the Rapid Response Unit, the National Security Training Academy, the E999 system, and the Operations Center were formed, all of which he said were anti-crime initiatives. And you could give Gary that. You could give Gary that. Good night, Richie, over there on Instagram. You could give him that. User says we only look at blue collar crime. What about white collar crime? They get away scot-free. Here, you are right to some extent, user. You are right to some extent, but here's the problem with that. The reason people look at blue collar crime is because blue collar crime is the thing that affects you much more noticeably. And if a country is unable to contain blue collar crime, then they are almost surely going to be unable to contain white collar crime. Blue collar crime is an easier thing viscerally. Thank you, Kevin. Woo, that's exactly the word I was looking for. Viscerally, exactly. And if a country is unable to see about blue collar crime, then your hopes for white collar crime are just diminished. They're gone. Think of this. If you go to school, think of this as a closed system. You're in a school, and the authorities of the school are unable to stop a student from slapping you every recess time and taking your money. A student in the school walks up to you every recess, hits you a hard slap, pow, and takes your money. And the principal, the deans, the security of the school cannot stop that. If the school cannot stop a student from beating you up, do you think they would be able to stop a student from copying your work during class? You understand what I'm saying? If they're unable to physically contain violence, would they be able to contain grift and theft like that? That's why blue collar crime is the notification. It is the thing that people check. Nicholas Moses says, again, the policymakers more focused on the importation of gel blasters than illegal guns. Nicholas Moses, I posted a status about that on Facebook a while ago. Like, are we serious? Gel blasters. And someone was talking about maybe it would be mistaken for real guns. And I'm thinking to myself, in Trinidad and Tobago, sir, if some bandit comes to me with something looking like a gun, I am 99.9% sure it's a gun, because it might be easier to get a Glock in Trinidad than to get a gel blaster. The gel blaster has more complications to bring in than to go on a block somewhere, pay the people 5,000-6,000, how much ever, not to say I know, pay the people how much ever money and buy a little gun. It's probably less complicated to buy an illegal gun than to buy a gel blaster. And these are policy issues. So for the minister to sit there high and mighty, as it were, and speak like, I am above all of this, I don't do the crime fighting. I'm policy. I'm policy. Well, your policy is failing. The policy is failing. Evidently, the policy is failing. Positive Radiation says, so you just have to appear to fight crime. Mr. Griffith added, you have a Minister of National Security trying to blame the police and say it is their responsibility. I held both portfolios. He is 100% incorrect. There's a void of leadership, and that is my biggest concern. And I could agree with him on that. And don't get me wrong, I regularly say this, and it annoys me that there's even the need to say things like this, but I still say it. I am not necessarily the biggest Double G fan. I don't like all the things that he did, but correct is correct. If you are the minister, the line minister in charge of the policy for national security, and the nation doesn't feel secure, then your policy is failing. Who else you expect them to go to? You're saying that the police are at fault, but the police are subordinate to your policy. The police work based on your policy. If the police aren't working, then it could be assumed that your policy isn't working either. Kevon says that starts from the PM. He is not leading. Sir, I kinda agree with you. Good night, Anne Juliet. I kinda agree with you there, because something I really disliked is, you see, when he walked away from the questions. During the sud turning for the solar farm or whatever they were building, and the media had questions about crime, and he dismissed them and walked away. That's poor leadership. That is poor leadership. And the idea that they seem to be pushing is that, we have created a system. We are the politicians. We create a system, and the system is supposed to be working. But evidently, the system isn't working. And if you have people complaining about the system not working, how are you going to ignore their complaints? And you are the person in charge of the system. You are the leader of the system. That is poor leadership. You even if you don't. Anne Juliet says, bro, we have to build more jail. I kind of agree with you, Anne Juliet. Unironically, Anne Juliet, I kind of agree with you, but we'll get on to that. You know what? Let's progress with the story. Mr. Griffith went on. He said businessmen's request for firearms will not be met by this government. No lost firearms. You are not going to get it until I return to serve you. So to anyone who feels that they need a firearm, I could give you assurance. This is going to be a very big debate on that political platform in the next 18 months. I can assure you it's going to be given in a very professional way, which is why, as I said, in my 3 years, not one firearm was lost, stolen, or used for a crime. And listen, that's something. And you all who are familiar in the live, you all know this is a pet peeve of mine. I always question this. The extreme reluctance of the PNM government to allow citizens to arm themselves, to defend themselves. Why is that so? Why is it so difficult for citizens to be allowed the right to defend themselves? And they act like they are so worried about what the legal guns would do, but there's no evidence of that. Like, there's no evidence in Trinidad to prove that people who get legal guns commit a lot of crimes. There's no statistic showing that. 4 deaths in 4 years. That's the record. Bro, the holder of an illegal firearm used it legally, and police were begging for the individual to come in to get charged. Yes, I remember that in St. Augustine. Oh, he defended something, and they were telling him come in for questioning, and like, no, he's not going to come. I can agree with Double G. The PNM just want their friends and family to have firearms alone. That's what it could seem like. But here's the thing. The PNM is the grand old party of Trinidad and Tobago. They're the elite. They're the establishment. They are who are in charge, who have been in charge for the majority of the time. The people who are in charge, generally speaking, are most threatened by arming the citizens. The people who are in charge are most threatened by arming the citizens. And I find it very interesting when I look at the CARICOM Symposium on Crime. The majority of it seem to be just guns. You know, the guns are the problem. Guns, the gun crime. And I despise that. I look at US news, as some of you know, and the US, the liberals in the United States, that left-wing side, the Democrats in the United States, they regularly talk about gun crime. There isn't gun crime, there's crime. and the criminals use a gun. The gun doesn't go out and commit a crime. CARICOM leaders point to US role in proliferation of guns. Regional leaders are once again looking to the US to examine its role in the proliferation of guns in the region. The CARICOM heads were speaking at a roundtable discussion on day one of the regional symposium, Violence as a Public Health Issue, the Crime Challenge. Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, gave one of the strongest rebukes, saying the US has no moral authority to speak to these issues. None. And the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Davis Casey, raised the issue of guns flowing from the United States into the region on more than one occasion. I've been telling the United States that I'm not going to get involved in their definition or their right to bear arms, but it cannot mean for us in the region that that right to bear arms also gives the right to trafficking those arms. Here's the thing. We are not going to get guns off of the earth. We are not going to get guns off of the earth. Rick Eddy says firearms don't make you safe because it comes down to who has it. And I 100% agree. And by the CARICOM governments insisting that law-abiding citizens cannot have weapons, the only people who actually get the guns are the criminals, because the criminals don't care to follow the laws. The thing is, I don't understand why people act like we can do something that has never happened before in history. Throughout human history, once a weapon has been available, people with negative intent get their hands on the weapon and utilize it. The way those people with negative intent are neutralized aren't by getting rid of the weapons. No one in the millennia previously, during the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Stone Age, no one previously, when they discovered how to smelt iron and started making swords out of iron, and the sea peoples out from the Mediterranean came and raided the civilizations of Anatolia and that fertile crescent there. When that happened, the solution wasn't to round up all of the iron swords in the world and melt them down and make sure nobody gets a sword again, because you know the criminals have swords and the criminals are killing people. So what we need to do is get rid of all of these swords. You see, the Grecians and the Romans and those people 3,000 and 2,000 years ago were smarter than some of our modern governments. They understood that it was actually impossible to get the genie back in the bottle. How you do this? The solution to this is make sure everyone gets a genie. And Juliet asks, we don't talk, I want this country to clean up. Now, my question is how we clean up Trinidad and Tobago. That's my problem. Here's this thing. Ha 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 ha. But Nathan, legal guns commit crimes too. TTR and TTPS, wrongs and crime scenes. Well, those aren't legal guns. Those are legal ammunition. Sold to the highest bidder, very likely. In the UK, they're making themselves look bad regulating knives. Yeah. It gets ridiculous. It gets ridiculous. You can't regulate the weapons. You have to regulate the criminal behavior. But let's look at the evidence of that. Let's look at the evidence of that. This is a story out from New York Post. Just 327 suspected crooks made up 30% of New York City's 22,000 shoplifting arrests in 2022. Listen to this story carefully. Listen to this story carefully. Just now, I'll get to the story. John Robbie says, stop the 1%ers from bringing the guns in their containers. I actually disagree with that, John Robbie, and I disagree with that positive radiation. I don't think I have said this over and over and over again. If you look at Trinidad and Tobago as it presently stands, them boys don't need no 1%er. Them boys bringing in their own containers. Them boys have their own speedboats. Them boys have their own registered businesses bringing in their own containers. Them boys have their own officers under their payroll. Them boys don't need that 1980s, 1990s thing where they have to get a Syrian to bring it. No. That's not the Trinidad we live in anymore. Where the poor ghetto youth need that is the big fish. We have to look for the big fish. No, we don't have to look for the big fish. We have to lock up them boys. 327, listen to this. Just 327 unrepentant crooks accounted for 30% of the Big Apple's 22,000 shoplifting arrests last year, the NYPD said Thursday. The staggering statistics mean the alleged recidivists got busted a total of about 6,600 times for an average of more than 20 times each. What does this prove? What does this prove? Well, if you want to know the reason it is that way, it's because the US is attempting to, do their criminal reform nonsense, their criminal justice reform, and they're doing it in a nonsense way where, criminals aren't bad people, it's circumstances that make people criminals. So we don't want to lock people up, we want to get them therapy and get them trained and, cure them of this criminality. But here's the problem. There's a small minority of society that will be unrepentantly criminal if given the chance. The solution to that has been discovered for thousands of years now. You take that small minority, you build a strong building that they cannot escape, and you put them inside of that building and make sure they do not leave. That's all. A big part of making society safe is locking up the criminals. It is that simple. Someone who was it, Andrew, what's her name before, was saying something like that, or what we need to do is lock up the criminals. That's literally it. I don't know how many of you live or frequent hotspot areas known to be, have a little criminal vibe of it. If any one of you live or frequent hotspot areas, how many of the bad boys have a case going on in court? How many of the bad boys are known to be criminals by the police? It's not like they are unknown entities. They are known. We know the people that are making Trinidad such a pestful place. The problem is they are free. That's literally it. We saw El Salvador. El Salvador figured that out. El Salvador figured out this masterpiece plan. You know what? How about we lock up the criminals? That's El Salvador came up with that plan all on their own. You see, they had something like going up thousands of murders per year. And the president figured something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. He didn't look to take away their guns because, them cartel boys, they have guns. You take away their guns, they're going to get some more. As I said that, so what was the guy name? As a crime prevention measure in the Bahamas, PM Davis reported that they instituted a buyback program for guns. However, he said that did not work, so he had to put a stop to it. Duh. At one point, we had a buyback program, but that buyback program became a business and industry for some persons, he explained. So, I've now reversed that to the point where, until we are able to stop the flow, the buyback program would not be a successful program. Oh, shocking. Criminals will not sell you their guns unless they could get some more. And Juliet says, bro, I agree everything you are saying, but I done talking. if you're done talking, I understand, but you must understand on my side that this live is about me speaking. So I don't know what you want me to do exactly. Would you prefer me not speak about these issues, not highlight the issues, so we done talk? God bless you too, Anne Juliet. Crime wasn't a public health problem, it was a security and economic problem. And that's the thing. That's the thing. I think when you attempt to look at crime as a public health problem, I understand the conceptualizing of it. That okay, it's a problem as significant or even more significant than COVID-19, etc. Yes, I understand why you are saying that. But the treatment of crime, if you think about it as a public health issue, I think you would run into problems in the treatment of crime. The treatment of crime isn't to cure the ailments of these people, it's to jail them. What are my views here? What are my views here? But Nathan shots calling from the jail, locking them up may not help. Well, the thing is positive radiation. Even if shots calling from the jail, the shots can only be called if there are people willing to do the murders on the outside. The killers are on the outside. Like, I feel, I wager, we had a murder rate of over 600 people murdered last year. How many murderers do you think did the 600 murders? If I were to guess, I'm guessing here, I would guess less than 100 murderers committed the over 600 murders in Trinidad and Tobago. Hello, XOXOXO. I would guess that. It's not like we have 600 murderers doing the 600 killings. Listen, the prison system in a backlog of people waiting for a court case. Yep, we know who doing it and won't be killing him. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing. When the whole system is tied up as it is, and the Minister of National Security blames the police, but when the police arrest people, they send them to the court system, and then the DPP doesn't have enough prosecutors. So, all right. We have a problem with corrupt police not arresting all that they need to arrest. But when they do arrest the people and charge the people, we have the problem of not enough prosecutors inside the office of the DPP, so we can't go through the cases fast enough. The PM asks people to come forward with info, then the police go back and talk, say who give them info. XOXO, we have moderators that will block you. Possession of marijuana in small quantity for people who can't even afford bail. Yeah. The idea of marijuana being illegal is a silly thing. It's a silly thing. And as you brought this up, Johnny Abraham last week said the TTPS should have sent a message to the Arangwes robbers. Yes, I saw he said that. Listen to this. I was reading the Jamaican Prime Minister. Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, had a similar position on the US role in the influx of guns. He said the United States needs to partner with the Caribbean in the same way the Caribbean partnered with the US in the decades-long war on drugs. It's the greatest unfairness that we have diverted resources in other areas in which we could have spent it to fund and support a war on drugs, Holness said. And I think, right, there's the problem. I don't think we should have had the war on drugs. Neither should we have had the war on guns. What was the result of the war on drugs? Did the war on drugs decrease the amount of people using drugs? No. Did the war on drugs decrease the amount of people selling drugs? No. Did the war on drugs decrease the amount of people producing drugs? No. The only thing the war on drugs did was imprison thousands of people and create a system to pay some people and make more money inside of it. There was no, I don't see any betterment for the society that came from the war on drugs. There have been studies on this. Over and over, there have been studies on this. Mr. Smooth says it's so sad that we focus on the design criminals and not the genocide killers. Okay. And Mr. Holness is saying that the Caribbean partnered with the United States in their war on drugs, and just like that, we need to partner in the war on guns. And I think it would be the same futility. It would be the same futility where we devote whole heaping lots of resources and throw them into a hole because it's a problem that isn't solved like that. It's a problem that cannot be solved like that. I don't think MJ should be illegal. I also wish young people would consume MJ less. I agree with both of those points. I don't think it's a good thing, especially for people under 25, to be consuming in large amounts. I think it's something that anyone should be very careful about their consumption of, obviously. But I think the concept of the government making it illegal is an insane thing. And this goes back, I think, to the discussion like we were having back last week before on the laws where you talk about things like seatbelts. I don't think it's the government's business to police someone's seatbelt. The government's job is not to protect someone necessarily from themselves. Believe that or not. The government's job is to protect us from each other, to make sure that another person doesn't contravene my rights. And we live in systems here where our government seems like it's so much more interested in protecting us from ourselves. You know, how dare you drive a vehicle that is not inspected? Wow, that might be dangerous, little Trini. We cannot allow that. You cannot do that. You don't have on your seatbelt. No. Come pay a fine. We made $30-something million off of seatbelt violations, and we are going to boast about that because seatbelts are so important. But we cannot stop people from invading your home. You're out here making sure that when I choose to drive, I have to protect myself. But you can't stop criminals from the other side of Trinidad from invading people's homes. And I say from the other side of Trinidad on purpose, because I think in this discussion, we need more honesty. We need more honesty. Look at the home invasions. Now, to be fair to the police officers, I've noticed a trend in the last 2 weeks or so where it seems from the news, it seems like the police are catching more people. It could seem like that. It could seem like that. Where are the people from when they catch them? Where are the people from when they catch them? Listen. From reading the news, it seems to me if there's a home invasion anywhere in Trinidad, you just block the entrance to Port of Spain and environs and you will catch the people because they are going to be heading back to one of those areas surrounding Port of Spain. There is a location, there is a geographical side to this. Scotty Boss, we spoke about that earlier and I'm all for that. I am firmly for that. So are you being racist or truthful? I'm not being racist at all. I didn't mention race, but that's the next part I was getting. That's the next part I was getting to. And this is the issue even when people look at this with race. Because I've seen the undertones. I look at the comments. You see the undertones being said in the comments. And you see the feeling, if I am a businessman of Indian descent living in Central or South, and I get raided by 5 Afro-Trinidadians, all from a foreign area from my neighborhood. And then I look and the next day the same thing happens. And then the next day the same thing happens. It starts to be very difficult to tell people that you shouldn't look at this with a racial basis. It becomes very difficult to tell people this. You must understand that. And to try to encourage people, no, don't look at this with a racial eye. Don't look at this with a racial eye. Becomes a very difficult thing to do. The problem is, to me, it's not even racial. Because it's not necessarily race, but much more location based. Much more location based. And I think if we are going to deal with something like this, because of all of, it's not just as an Indian, Ziza. Trust me, if you are an Afro Trinidadian and you were middle income, you would not have felt safe in the country either. It's not race. Even though it could seem like that, it is not. Even though it could seem like that. Yes, it is economic, but there. All right, so let me just dial that back to some of those factors. So a lot of those suburbs of Port of Spain were filled with manual workers from other Caribbean countries, with, you know, Eric Williams and all of that. Because of that, it created that slum area around those places. The biggest predictor for crime in terms of statistics isn't poverty. Is not poverty. It's relative poverty. Meaning, if someone looks, and in the society there are people much wealthier than them and there are people much lower, the people much lower generally that's the time you see crime. When you bring in outsiders, put them in a community and lock them into a cycle of manual labor and not being able to earn assets, you create a cycle of poverty with people who are already outsiders to this society. Those people have an internet feel. What you end up creating is nearly like some of those places would feel like if they are their own little small country. We're going out, and I am in my little, if you think about this as some of those areas. If I'm living in a hotspot area, I could nearly see this as it has devolved to the spot where the rules of the state of Trinidad don't function here. The rules of the big boss of this area function here. And in that case, I am basically an independent country. I am like a Viking. And I'm going out to raid another independent country and bring back their wealth into my independent country. And that's the way some of those hotspot areas function. If you listen to some of the people speak, that's the way they see it. Positive Edition says, look at the jobs the criminal elements had or have. I always note that. I am in the construction sector. We do contracting. And something I always note, if you look at someone that has been arrested for some kind of criminal activity, their occupation 80% of the time is laborer. These are the issues. If you really genuinely want to tackle these issues, these are the things you have to tackle. Be honest about the geographical nature of this. So if you are tackling the criminal issue, you have to have a focus on an area. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. And you may be criticized for it, but you need that. There needs to be a focus on those areas, because those areas are the areas that are producing the majority of the criminals. Reality. A big part of fighting crime is locking up the criminals. Reality. How much more can our country do to help them get out? I made a video about this recently. The idea that many of us in the West, it's a Marxist idea. It's a socialist idea. The idea that if you give people enough wealth, if you give people enough resources, to meet their needs, then they will not be criminals. That idea is demonstrably wrong. And it has been shown to be wrong over and over again. I have said this repeatedly. Poverty doesn't cause crime. Crime causes poverty. The example I said way back in the video when I did it, the crime I said way back in the video when I did it, is let's put ourselves in this situation. You are a resident of Beetham. You want to open a mechanic garage. Can you open a mechanic garage in Beetham and get people outside of Beetham to visit your mechanic garage? Okay, you cannot open that mechanic garage. But, you have mechanic skills. Okay, you could go find a job. You go out there looking for a mechanic job. You tell them, I am from Beetham. How many mechanic garages will hire you from Beetham to work on their cars? Some might, but a lesser number will. Okay, you know that you know a big businessman who's looking to open a new garage somewhere, and you know you have the skill to run that garage. You go to talk, you present your business idea to him. He says, yes, I'm willing to hire you as the manager. You go out there and open that garage. Will that businessman invest his money and open a garage in Beetham? Chances are no. So is it that the poverty leads someone in Beetham to crime, or is it that the criminality that exists in the community increases the poverty? That's actually the reality. If you are able to remove the criminal elements, here's what's going to happen. The woman who is faithful in selling her goods, she will remain faithful in selling her goods, and she will get better at it, and she will make money. They're not financially investing in those areas. That's incorrect positive radiation. That's incorrect. I would not doubt that if you were to get a chart, some of the money sunk into the most depressed areas may be more than the money sunk into Valsine and Lanchpark. I don't know for Trinidad. I know the statistics in the United States. The worst performing school districts are the districts with the most money. Money and investment is not the solution. Get the criminals out of the people's community. Listen. The lie of the government so often. They act like, Tanti Merle need the Ministry of Education to tell her what is best for her son Jerry. No. Tanti Merle wants the best for her son Jerry all on her own. What she wants from the ministry is to make sure that them gangsters who are trying to recruit her son to the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12s, them gangsters not on the road. That's what Tanti Merle needs. If Tanti Merle is able to navigate her community without the gangsters, she could raise up young Jerry. Nathan, criminal organizations operate similar to the military, correct. Many people from Beetham Gardens get government hampers every week. Ezekiel, I know. I've spoken to counselors, and I've spoken to counselors who speak about their frustration. I remember speaking to someone in politics previously, and they were talking about the more they invested, previously, a while back, the more they invested into the community, it actually did worse. Remember the officer in the last live? He spoke about it. There was once upon a time where they attempted to give contracts into these communities. Because remember, most of these criminals, what is their occupation? We spoke about this just now. Their occupation is laborers. They're laborers. So, okay, you're laborers, you need work. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to send contracts into the community, and you all can get the contracts. All right. Great. Then they started to murder each other for those contracts. The idea that was supposed to help them, the gangs started murdering each other for the contracts. How many of you all ever gone into the Beetham? I have been into the Beetham numerous times. How to disperse the criminals? You don't want to disperse the criminals. Here's another reality. Here's another reality. So we're trying to be real here. We're trying to be real here. The criminal are our family and friends, big and small. We put race before country. We are a nasty people. I don't understand the correlation between everything you said there. So I'll leave it at that. But you're talking about dispersing. You're talking about dispersing the criminals, Ziza. They did some of that before. Allegedly, Oropoon Gardens in Piaco when they did that HDC, project, they took some of the residents from Port of Spain and environs who may have allegedly been criminals, allegedly, and put them in Orapun Gardens. Anyone knows what the news reports are like out of Orapun Gardens right now? Anyone aware? What's Orapun Gardens like? No amount of weekly handouts can feed even one family in there. I admit RE poverty and crime, but that may be the case now, but it didn't start like that. It didn't start like what? Well, the news out of Orapun is that Orapun is a criminal hotspot right now. From my experience in sport, the idea that sport distracts youths from crime is wrong. Indisciplined youths fail at sports too. I agree, and I partially disagree. It's not the solution. It is not the solution. But I do know some youths who would have been involved in some less than savory activities if they were not as engrossed in sporting activities. That is true. Jesus says, so how can this be done to eradicate the criminals? Treat them as Palestinians under occupation? No. I've said it before. The solution, a major part of the solution to crime isn't so complicated. It isn't so complicated. You lock up the criminals. Listen, this has been figured out for a long time now. Jails in societies are not a new thing. They've been jailing people in societies for a very long time. It now starts just now we have to go to work for criminals. What do you mean just now? Who used to say you aren't working for a criminal currently? Timothy Elliott says crime may not be 100% as a result of poverty, but it's a big part of it. Yeah, I don't disagree. But I am saying the causatory side of it isn't true. I am saying that the poverty, when you're talking about the chicken and the egg as it were, the poverty isn't the thing that causes the crime, because there are numerous areas that are poor that don't devolve into criminality. The poverty doesn't lead to crime. Poverty may be a factor that makes it easier to end up in criminal activities, but nonetheless, poverty doesn't cause crime. That's what I'm saying there. Jesus says, is there enough space for them? What about due process, human rights? Kevon says, I would be very disappointed with the symposium if El Salvadorian policies aren't discussed and considered. Well, I think you will be disappointed, Kevon, because Caribbean leaders don't generally go down that line. We aren't those kind of leaders. Very rarely in the Caribbean you see leaders who are willing to really risk it and make bold decisions out there. We are follow fashion leaders. We follow what we see others fashion. How many leaders in the Caribbean come up with innovative ideas? As I saw someone talk about the PM of the Caribbean, you know, the lady that many people love over there in Barbados. Everything she says comes out of the liberal economic order handbook. It's nothing new. It's nothing new. No grand plan that's directly focused on the Caribbean and processed through that. No. The justice system and courts have a big reason in why crime is how it is. I agree. Noel says, I love my country. That's good. Caesar, I like that idea as treating them as a city-state and waging all-out war, just like the English and the IRA. And you see, I think it's going to get more serious. And the reality is, as things get more dire, what people would be willing to allow would increase. So someone was talking about human rights and due process and stuff like that. Wars don't have due process. And wars happen pretty regularly. Reason being, there are situations that could occur where a lot of people would be very okay with all of that human rights due process business being thrown out the window. And And I'll get to Pierre Motley. And home invasions that are starting to increase in Trinidad and Tobago, I think those are one of the things that would increase what people would be willing to take. Home invasions would increase people's desperation. A home invasion is a scary thing. You cannot be safe in your home, then you cannot be safe anywhere. That throws all of your feeling of safety in your society off kilter. So that home invasion business that is on the rise, I feel that would allow a lot of people to be very okay with a long list of very strange things. John Robbie says maybe they will wait until the gangs take over and have the country under siege like Haiti. Exactly, because the gangs won't stop. Because the gangs won't stop. They never stop. They won't stop until they are stopped. Some people don't have a choice but to turn to crime. I don't believe that. I think you always have a choice. There's always a choice. It's a choice. I mean, you could see some people have a more difficult choice, or some people have an easier route into crime. Yes, I agree. But to say they don't have a choice, I disagree. Ziza says, don't be surprised if the middle class do as the upper class and hire some Colombians. Go sort it out. Wow. Poverty is the driving force. I disagree. Here's the issue with that poverty being the driving force kind of thing runs to W. Then the poorest countries are supposed to be the most criminal. And that's not necessarily true. And the poorest regions are supposed to be the most criminal. And that's not necessarily true. You see, the reason I don't like that is some people don't peel that back. They don't peel that back to see what is the nugget of lie that sits underneath the assumption of poverty causes crime. The little lie nugget that sits under there is what has a lot of people assuming that if someone is educated, if someone is wealthy, then obviously they are a good person. The best people in society are the richest, most educated people. No, that's not true. Being poor doesn't decrease your morality. Criminal activity is based on your view of right and wrong. Being poor doesn't change your view of right or wrong. In fact, in most people's view, in most worldviews of morality actually subscribe to the view that generally you find more morality among the poorer people. Most moral worldviews subscribe to that. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Moral worldviews. So to make it seem like crime, that lack of morality and poverty has such a link, I don't like it. Now, if you speak about crime being a factor that facilitates criminality, I could agree. And what poverty would limit the kind of crime you could do. So let's say I'm criminally minded and I am a poor man. Then I cannot go out and be Bernie Madoff and start a pyramid scheme. I don't have the resources to do that kind of criminality. Not sure where I read that some criminals feel that this is their right to take. Yes, some criminals may have that feeling. Now, on the Motley issue, here's my problem with Miss Motley. Miss Motley. I like how she speaks. Diplomatically, she may be one of the best, if not the best diplomat in the Caribbean. Probably not even by a close race. I would agree with that. But when I listen to what she calls for, that's the opposite of the solutions that I want. The solutions I want are in Cedras. And the solutions that she so eloquently keeps calling for are Toku. She brighter than Rowley. Maybe. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. But brightness brightness isn't the factor to rule the world. There were many bright people that wanted some crazy things out there. In fact, most of the people who did the most insane things in human history were very bright people. The stupid people don't generally do the worst, because they don't even know what to do. They're too stupid. The bright people are the ones you really have to watch out for. So, a prime example, I remember some people spoke about when she decreased the fuel price in Barbados, man, and it was right around the time when Trinidad had an increase, and they were like, look at Barbados, that's someone who cares. And they didn't look at the news. They didn't look at the news 2 months down the road, where the IMF is now in Barbados, moving around and frolicking around. And that's my issue with Miss Motley. She's a globalist. And I have nothing I want from those globalists. I am sorry. Globalism is centralizing things more. The problem, people in Trinidad regularly speak about the problem in Trinidad is we are too centralized. Trinidad is too centralized. We need to decentralize. And then you would go and ask for globalism? Do you want the leaders of your country, the people telling you what to do with your daily life, do you want them to be from Sweden or Denmark or Germany? Do you want some German man who has never sat under a Julie mango tree and feel the juices run down his hand making laws for Trinidad? For all you know, there'd be a law where there should be no public consumption of mangoes, because mangoes may bring sour flies, and that creates an eyesore. So the German person that's making the law for down Trinidad banned public mango eating in Trinidad. And if you think things like that are ridiculous, you haven't read enough history, because things like that is exactly what happens when you have leaders like that from so far away. I'm sorry. I don't want to recreate empire. We already got away from the European colonists. I don't want to return it. I don't. So, I forgot the exact term Miss Motley regularly uses. But she keeps calling for global direction and leadership or something to that effect. And I don't like it. They will start to talk about the carbon footprint of the mango tree. Exactly. The downside of democracy is you can't please everybody. That's true. That's true. And that's why democracy isn't an automatically good thing, Like, some people speak like democracy was handed down from the God of the heavens and earth, and he said, thou shalt be democratic, and if you all are democratic, you are going to be righteous. That's not true. Who is there's a saying, vox populi vox Dei. That's a lie. The voice of the people is the voice of God. That's a lie. The voice of the people for those of you who celebrated Easter recently, the voice of the people killed God, They killed him, right? Just 2,000 years ago. So the voice of the people aren't the voice of God. Democracy isn't automatically a good thing. And if I want democracy as close to me as possible. Positive radiation says once you could get the majority of the electorate to vote for you, you run the show. And over in Tobago, I think Tobagonians should understand this best. Like, Tobagonians are upset that they feel like they are under the shackles of Trinidad, their sister isle that they have a shared history with for a pretty long time. That the leader of Trinidad is a Tobagonian, and the Tobagonians feel like we're shackled by this Trinidadian leadership we have. We don't want that. They down on us too much. And then you would go and ask for Europeans to come in? Really? That's what you want? Really? That's what you want? And some people, I regularly make this point in the lives. You have to be careful what you ask for in terms of governance and leadership and politics. Because you have to know what is required to give you what you want. Visa. Visa. Let it be known that the Tobagonians have a strong presence inside of the live, and you will be fought for that one, sir. You will have fight for that one. The entitled Wednesday's Tobago night, Ziza. Wednesday's Tobago night. We will speak about. Make sure to be here Wednesday. You see that guy, Positive Radiation, and the next one, Aleki. I presume they may have some questions. They may have some questions for you on that topic. But honestly, as I was saying, these are my issues with Prime Minister Motley. As good as she speaks, as wise as she might be, as eloquent as she admittedly is, I find the prescriptions that she gives not in line with the direction I want. They're not in line with the directions I want. And like, if you look at Brexit and things like that, many parts of the world seem to be moving in the direction where they're casting off the rule from the higher ups. Why would we be leaning into that? And climate change is a perfect Trojan horse. I am not saying climate change isn't real or doesn't exist or anything to that effect, but climate change is a perfect Trojan horse for the entry of globalism. Because in order to solve climate change, you need global leadership, of course. Ronzo.w says, I don't know what's wrong in TNT and Jamaica. Other islands have serious crimes in check. I think it's cultural. A large part of it is cultural. It's similar, like there are some cities in the United States where the crime is just out of control. I remember in university, I was speaking to some black people of African descent, and I was telling them a major part to me, when I look at black culture in the West, a major part of what takes away from it is that many black people hold on to something, call it their culture, and it's poison. Many black people hold on to something, calling it their culture, and it's poisonous. My culture, this is my culture, and it's poisoning you. It's poisoning your society. The strong black woman trope. Maybe you need to be a weak black woman that needs another weak black man, and both of you all weak together going to be a strong family unit and raise your children with both parents. It's the culture. Yes, and Thomas Sowell linked it. He linked where that culture came from. And you want to know the irony of it? According to Thomas Sowell, he is a professor of economics, and he has written several books on economics and history and race and society. He says it's the Highlander Scottish culture. A culture that came down from Europeans that some black people in the southern United States adopted. The culture where, and it's the same culture that some of the hillbillies had, where everything is so honor-based. I will ruin my whole life if you disrespect me. How dare you mash my shoe? My shoe? Ah, boom, and you blow up over that. And you adopt this and say this is my culture. When you look at some black people and they're fighting over the depravity that is in some hip-hop music, the depravity, and fighting to say this is cultural, y'all wouldn't understand this is our culture. Sexual permissiveness and promiscuity within the community, they fight to retain it. Y'all don't understand this. This is cultural. Y'all don't okay, it is cultural, but it's poisoning your culture. The racism of low expectations. Yo, Lincoln, what's going on? And to me, that's where you see a difference. It's not racial. There are many black communities. You go into them and it's totally different from the other community. Yeah, bro, it's been a while. And it's totally different because it has a different culture. And someone was talking about psychological control and etc. You could really wonder about it because in the United States, was it Jimmy Carter or one of their presidents in like the 60s or 50s said that they're going to do something and have the black people voting Democrat for the next 100 years. And they'd made some changes within their political landscape that caused some changes within the black culture. Black rednecks and white liberals, correct, Kilvon? And they created that kind of slum culture, the ghetto youth culture. They created that where, and I was noting this. You go into numerous ghettos, Trinidad, England, United States, Jamaica. You go into ghettos, and there's a kind of familiarity. There's a familiar vibe with it. And some people say, that's the friendliness of the ghetto, the warmth of the ghetto. But I think you could have the warmth without the negative takebacks of the culture. We need to change the education system. We need to change the social system. We need to change the social system. We need to revert to the black culture where it was a shame to have a child out of wedlock. And you see, these things in modern times, we change some of these things, and then we're surprised when we see the results changing. We're surprised when we see the results changing. It's difficult when someone makes a mistake or someone does something if society shames them. No one likes that feeling. It doesn't feel good. No one wants that. But if we take away the consequences, be it shame, from society, are we now encouraging self-deleting, as it was, culturally suicidal behaviors? I saw the Prime Minister in the symposium. He waxed poetic. He was talking about, we have changed and we have allowed the culture to slip. And it's that slipping of the culture that has really done that and this and that and da-da-da-da. And okay, maybe true, but what have we done that has led to that slip? But honestly speaking, we need to change the Minister of National Security. Then Trinidad will get a what? Tobago different in that way. Lots of family values. They have more than us, and I hope they retain it. All right. We all will get it. You all will get it. You all will get to let that go on Wednesday. Ziza, be sure to be here on Wednesday. That'll be interesting. All right, folks. All right. I think that's all I have for now. The presence of shame is part of the reason Asians tend to have low crime rates. Exactly. Black culture, you want to help black culture bring back shame. I remember everyone's favorite deceased enemy, Kevin Samuels, and he was talking. I remember he had a whole lot of videos about the bonnets and bedroom slippers, that many black women would wear their bonnets and their bedroom slippers to walk the roads, and he was upset about that. We do that, Ziza. You don't worry, you'd like this live. That's Thursday. We have all of that, Ziza. Thursday, you can jump in the discussion and we all talk. Thursday. But yeah, that's why I'm telling you. And he spoke about that, they would walk with their bonnets and their bedroom slippers outside. And I think that might be a further part of it. Shame. And the sad part is sometimes we reinforce those negative things where we throw out shame and say that the shaming part of it is racism. That's white supremacy. How dare you shame the black sister? The black sister probably needs shame. And the black brother too. They need to feel shame. You need to feel shame when you have a party and the bottles that you're drinking in your party are stolen from the Chinese grocery. You need to feel shame for that. Bring back shame. All right. The IDGF mentality eliminates standards and causes lower achievement. Correct. And I saw Ja Morant, who is already in some trouble. Listen to this black culture thing. Ja Morant, a basketballer in the United States, he's already in trouble. Very skillful guy, but he's getting into trouble after trouble after trouble, and he has a serious attitude problem. The last trouble, he had a gun in a nightclub. Then I'm seeing something there, he's playing, and the jersey his father has on in support of Ja Morant is, "Do you? They will adjust." And I'm thinking, how foolish can you be as a father? Your son is an indisciplined young man, and your advice is attitude boy, arrogance boy. Culture. Anyway, that's all I have for now, folks. This has been the Mindful Live. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. Most in current generation just don't care anymore. They don't care because there isn't shame. There isn't shame. That's why they don't care. There isn't enough shame. Our country being freed from the reins of colonialism has never really pushed for individualism. True. Just be yourself. You're perfect. Never try to improve. Worst advice you could get. You see that? Just be yourself. Worst advice. Be better than yourself. Yourself today, be better than yourself tomorrow. Don't just be yourself. You could be better than that. Improve. Horrible advice. Don't be yourself. Be better than that. All right, folks, it was nice. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you guys for the next Mindful Live session, which is going to be tomorrow evening around that 9:30 p.m. time. How can you shame people in a shameless society? Ha! Shame brings shame. Be your virtuous self. That's a better way to put it, Caesar. All right, folks, I will see you guys again for the next Mindful Live tomorrow evening. Until then, hold it down, stay safe, stay protected. The country dangerous out there. Stay jiggy. Latest people, peace out.